Adam Schefter covering the draft for the Mothership, and good to have him back. Adam, how are you?
Hello, Dan. Long time no speak.
Well, glad to have you back. Let me start with the drama with Blake Bortles. I didn't see a mock draft with Blake Bortles going to Jacksonville. They were pretty quiet throughout this entire process here for the most part. Is this their guy all along? They just hit it well?
Dan, let me say this, that I know we're all going to talk about Johnny Manziel, and that was the big drama of the evening, but I thought the Bortles pick was the most surprising pick of the night by far, and I say that for a few reasons. Nobody, as you mentioned, was putting him in their mock drafts, but the bigger thing was this. I had spoken to a couple teams on Wednesday night that told me in the middle of round one, that there were a bunch of teams reaching out like Arizona, Houston, Minnesota, teams that were poised to jump back into the first round there to try to make a play. And all the teams that I had heard about were quarterback-needy teams. So it was apparent at that point, I think, that most people thought that Johnny Manziel would be a top 10, 12, 13 pick with St. Louis having that second first-round pick. And that once Manziel went, probably no later than 13, that everybody would try to jump up to the teams in the 14 to 18 range to try to go get Blake Bortles. Now, the Titans were never going to consider a quarterback in the first round, so that was not going to happen. So once Manziel went, then everyone that wanted a quarterback was going to jump back up. And so, to me, that's the only thing. Like, in the draft, you don't get cute, you don't mess around. If you have a guy and a high grade on a guy, you go get him. So bravo to Jacksonville for that. I've got no complaints with that. They love Blake Bortles. They went and got Blake Bortles. But it's easy today to sit back and say, well, if Cleveland traded back from 4 to 9 with Buffalo and got back the 1 this year and a 1 and a 4 next year, Jacksonville might have been able to go from 3 to 9, get Bortles there, and then get the extra 1 and 4 or whatever they want for next year. Now, again, that is really easy for me to say. That's the ultimate second guess. But I think it's true. I don't think anyone was taking Bortles there, but a sign of him and how much they liked him is they didn't want to get cute at all. They wanted that quarterback. They got their quarterback. So good for them. That's the way it works.
We've all been in that situation in a fantasy draft where you have your guy and there's one guy before you and he ends up taking the guy you were going to take. I got the feeling Tampa did that to Cleveland, that they wanted Mike Evans. Am I reading too much into that?
No. Cleveland's plan, and you know when you're talking with teams before you're gossiping, that was one of the things we talked about. Cleveland wanted to move back to take Justin Gilbert.
Wow.
Mike Pettin is a cornerback-obsessed coach from the Rex Ryan mold, and Rex Ryan could take a defensive back in the first round of every draft and be very happy. And Mike Pettin is not far from that either. So he wanted that cornerback there. And in a perfect world, that's what they were going to do. Now, if Cleveland had stayed at 4, I really believe the pick would have been Jake Matthews. So when Cleveland traded back, that made Atlanta a first-round winner. And that's the amazing part is you're putting together all these mocks and how the draft plays out. And inevitably, players go in the slots, in the areas that they're supposed to. But one move impacts a player's future because I think without that trade, Jake Matthews is the pick in Cleveland. And Jake Matthews doesn't get to Atlanta. Taylor Lewan goes to Atlanta, but instead Taylor Lewan slides down to Tennessee at number 11, and Blake Bortles is off the board. That would have been a great trade area for teams to come back. I mean, so there's all sorts of crazy things that happen from just one move, but Blake Bortles is the pick. There's a lot on him, and Jacksonville clearly loved the guy, and now we'll see how it works out there for him.
Finish the following sentence. Johnny Manziel fell because...
Fell due to a variety of factors. It's just not a simple answer. I know that teams did a lot of investigating into his background. I don't think they came up with anything too much. People were divided on Johnny Manziel. There were some people that loved him. There were some people that didn't really like him. So you had to find the spot. Like earlier yesterday, we were starting to hear Jacksonville liked him. And I spoke to somebody in Jacksonville during the day, and they're like, yeah, spent a lot of time with him, did a lot of work. I feel like an idiot. I never even asked about Blake Bortles at that time. But they led me to believe that Johnny Manziel would be in the conversation, which turned out not to be true.
But did he drop because of football-related questions?
I believe that ultimately was it, yes.
Okay.
Here's the thing. You're talking about a guy who's roughly 6 foot, okay, who he's got huge hands, which help him, and huge feet, all good stuff. But I think people worry about the way he plays and him holding up long term, because I think he took 30 hits per game at Texas A&M, and it's one thing to take those hits at A&M, and now it's another thing to go do it in the NFL. And I think people wondered how his playing style will translate to the NFL. Now, to me, guy's a playmaker. He's always made plays. I think he'll keep making plays. But I think NFL teams were concerned about that. And so Jacksonville went with its quarterback. The next team that came into play, Cleveland, traded back. Cleveland had other needs it wanted to address earlier. Tampa Bay absolutely talked about Johnny Manziel but didn't want to pass up Mike Evans. Minnesota talked about Johnny Manziel but knew that Detroit was going to take Anthony Barr and had to go get Anthony Barr there, the pass rusher, and come back for a quarterback later. St. Louis talked about Johnny Manziel at 13 again, and if it played out a different way, where let's just say Tampa had gone Aaron Donald, I think St. Louis absolutely would have talked about Johnny Manziel at 13. But it didn't happen that way. The board fell in a way that went against Johnny Manziel and caused him to fall. Then everyone wondered, would the Dallas Cowboys do that? And actually, I was sitting with Chris Mortensen, and everybody knew Dallas had to get better on defense. And everybody was expecting, in a perfect world, Aaron Donald goes to Dallas, or Ryan Shazier goes to Dallas, or one of those defensive players. But those defensive players went off the board, so Dallas was kind of stuck, except Zach Martin fell right into their laps. Great player, but not exactly a huge need for a Cowboys defense that really was in disrepair last year. So it's just a whole thing on Manziel that caused him to fall. And there were teams trying to trade up, like Tennessee almost had a deal with Cleveland at 11, and then Tennessee picked Taylor Lewan. Minnesota tried to kill him. Kansas City at one point was going to pick Manziel. So there are a lot of things going on here. It's not just as simple as Johnny Manziel just slid.
Derek Carr situation here. Houston's on the clock. Does David Carr's sins, if you want to call it that, 10 years ago, make it impossible for the Texans to take his brother?
Everybody in the league is wondering who Houston's going to take, and I think if Houston goes quarterback, my money would be on Jimmy Garoppolo, the Eastern Illinois quarterback who a lot of people pegged as a first-round talent. Houston's in the driver's seat there. I think if they go quarterback, that would be the guy. Derek Carr, my belief is, will wind up in Oakland today. That's what I think. I think there were some people in that organization who felt like he could have been a first-round pick. I think he's the quarterback that has been on top of the Raiders draft board. And I think if he lasted long, I think Oakland would be thrilled to have Derek Carr later today.
The final 30 seconds, the most questionable decision last night was made by?
Well, again, boy, I hate to second-guess anybody, Dan. I mean, there are a few different things you look at. Well, I'll say this. I love that Buffalo got Sammy Watkins. I hate giving up first-round picks the next year. I hate that. A 1 and a 4 is a steep price to pay for a wide receiver to go up 5 spots in the draft. But they got the player who some believe was the single best player in the draft.
Give me the bad decision.
Well, the bad is you don't want to give up future picks, but you get the best, maybe the best player in the draft.
Wait, they made the best move and the worst move?
Dan, I'm always going to try to be politically correct.
It's good to have you back. Did you miss me?
Dan, I always miss you. I always think about you, and it's nice to be with you today.
Hey, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, Adam.
Anytime, Dan. You got it.
All right, that's Adam Schefter. I don't know if it's any time we can have him, right? I like how these guys make it seem like, hey, call me tomorrow. Oh, come on. I don't have a show. It's all right. I'll come on. I'll come on Saturday. All right. Good to have Schefter on.